Invitation, Ed, and always happy to share a different state's perspective. I don't think any of us can, we're all laboratories here and learning from each other, so appreciate the invitation. I'll put in the context that I think we have continued to learn how to use our attribute markets to maximize the benefits of what is an evolving state goal from an emission standpoint, and from what we really see as an increasing ambition of the amount of clean electricity that's really required. If you go to the next slide, if anybody has not seen this, this is a really guiding principle that will inform Massachusetts in the years to come, but issued in the end of last year, a decarbonization roadmap looked at all of the options across the economy of what would ultimately lead to the least cost net zero goal in 2050. If you go to the next slide, I think what is really highlighted from that report is increasingly we're more confident that electrification will be a primary pathway to deep decarbonization. And that was across all scenarios. So if you assign different assumptions about the cost of electricity, the cost of alternative pathways, we still saw a real foundational shift of the amount of clean energy that would be required to meet those goals. It's a little hard to break out from the slides there, but that middle wedge really is looking at offshore fixed and floating. And we do see that offshore wind really will play a significant resource role in the decades to come. We also see significant growth in solar as being a viable path for megawatt hours for clean electricity. And we do still see a need for a balancing for reliability purposes, a natural gas / hydrogen facility to balance the intermittent renewables. So this was done to look at the least cost pathway. It is not a plan for the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources or Energy and Environmental Affairs. Rather, it has informed what we established for a plan that goes through 2030. But it is informative of what will be guiding, I think, this region and Massachusetts as the resources to consider. And I wanted to create that kind of framework because it does assess the scale that we're really looking at, and that may be a doubling of the megawatt hours from clean energy and over the next couple decades. Next slide. So if you look at what is the portfolio of policies, I'd go back to what this region really saw in 2013, 2014, and with the retirements of the two nuclear facilities, it was instructive for the legislature and the governor to look at resources that really meet the demands of our winter cold periods. And ultimately in 2016, the legislature authorized procurements for offshore wind up to 1,600 megawatts, and also for clean energy, which did include hydro imports. And I think that was largely driven to diversify the clean energy resources that we have in the region to meet the demands of what was vulnerability for the region during cold snaps. And ultimately what that has led is we have built upon the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard, which is really the foundation of our energy standard, that we have built additional policies to support both existing resources, which that clean energy standard existing, we have a portfolio where existing nuclear assets would be eligible for, as well as a clean energy standard for new resources into the region, including hydro. We have also adopted a policy to promote the deployment of clean energy during peak periods. That was established 1 year ago, and that is trying to get ahead of what we've seen of that solar has, primarily solar, has really altered what our peak periods are. And I'll go into this a little bit further, but the Clean Peak Standard is trying to ensure that we deploy clean energy when we need it most, which yields specific ratepayer benefits, and we're learning has important distribution system benefits as well. So this is the kind of the range of our different portfolio standards that exist in Massachusetts today. Next slide. I think it's important to think about what your goals are with a program. We certainly saw from our long-term decarbonization roadmap that the least cost pathway could include a lot of first existing resources, hydropower resources, and offshore wind from a cost effectiveness standpoint. I think from for a lot of reasons, solar will continue to be an important policy tool, both from economic development in the Commonwealth, and also for trying to align meeting megawatt hours where demand is focused. And that was revealed in the roadmap. We have set up, as I think for the last decade, we've sort of recognized that there should be a specific solar program that continues to lower costs and tries to align with some of the intersection of land use. So I won't go through all of the details in this, but the SMART program is a tariff-based program, which moved away from an environmental attribute program, which was the SREC. And that really did create a lot of stability for compensation. It is something that I would recommend a lot of states to consider as a model. And there are policy levers embedded in it that create either incentives of where the solar is located, or subtraction in the amount of compensation based on whether it is building in new greenfield areas. One big change we've made recently is to require all projects over 500 kilowatts to be paired with storage. And we've increasingly tried to increase compensation and make it easier for lower income customers to access the program. We have looked to expand this to 3,200 megawatts, and that is in a proceeding at the department. A lot to get into with this program, but I think I'll conclude there. Next slide. The Clean Peak Standard is an interesting policy that really tries, as I think all of the audience is aware, the real structure of all of our environmental attribute programs is an annual compliance period that is not based on when you're really producing the electricity. Yet in New England, especially, we do see very scarce periods that constrains our natural gas system, relies on oil, and ultimately we do have challenges with our distribution system if we oversaturate solar. So pairing with storage is a key opportunity, and the clean peak standard, which was established last year, we do have now 37 megawatts of participating resources, and is really trying to drive at balancing the production of clean energy resources during the seasons. We provide higher incentives for producing clean energy during summer peak areas and winter, and also doing producing during historic peak periods. I think it is an important aspect to consider, really integrating storage throughout all of your policies. And I think it's just, we're scratching the surface at how that technology can be used as a distribution resource, a transmission asset, and ultimately improve the outcomes of using renewables as a decarbonization pathway. So we are looking to create an RFP that creates a financeable product for this. We just issued a straw proposal for that a couple weeks ago. But interesting results from this policy that tries to address, I think, what we're seeing of renewables start having a declining marginal value the more you start producing it. And I don't think it's a good policy outcome that we ultimately have high renewable generation during certain hours and then rely on fossil generation during colder hours during peak periods. So it is an effort to kind of get ahead of the curve of an emerging constraint on our electrical system and for the resources here in New England. Next slide. This is where we see our load based on all of those attribute markets and what our retail load is anticipated for going to 2050. So you can see that we, at this point, are projected to get close to what our retail load would be in 2050 with all of the requirements. We continue to think through the interaction of the clean energy standard long term, and we certainly think that there does need to be some regional coordination of establishing a clean energy standard regionally. We're undertaking a review of the CES currently. But we do see the interaction of the CES and all of these policies with electrification is also important, as we could see a significant increase on the annual compliance rate, as this is a percentage of the total load. We could see a significant increase in the 2030s of what the actual megawatt hours are required on from our portfolios. Next slide. This goes to an issue that I think I saw a question about this that we're trying to get ahead of. It's important to know the benefits of an attribute market and its limitations. We certainly see the whole NEPOOL GIS system and the renewable portfolio standards as being critical for tracking of progress. Yet it is limited in its effectiveness in actually generating additionality. And when I say that, talking to developers, it really is not a stable incentive that creates the predictability that a contract delivers. So as a result, we have relied on contracts to really obtain new projects, and ultimately how Massachusetts pursues it is through a procurement. Yeah, thank you. If you go to the next slide. Through all of these procurements that Massachusetts has gotten very good at, but what these are obtaining is both a product which is the environmental attributes as well as a fixed price per kilowatt. So we have done that, and this will actually create some additional challenges with our RPS market as these projects have gotten larger in scale, they have significant impacts on the supply of RECs on the overall market. And as a result, it may introduce additional volatility to the regional REC markets. So that is highlighting what the RPS compliance is and what we see with our offshore wind procurements. The two that have contracts are the Vineyard Wind Project and the Mayflower Project. That is all to be said that I think there is a moment, if you go to the next slide, that the current procurement model does have some significant limitations, one of which it's very hard to coordinate with a partner like Vermont or any other state, as it's very focused on utilizing our electric distribution companies. I won't go through all of these, but we increasingly think the current structure does not deliver the type of scale and predictability that our roadmap has highlighted may be necessary to meet our decarbonization goals. And I think lastly, I get into here the one structure that we've looked at regionally, if you go to the next slide, is an FCEM proposal, which we see a lot of merit to, which would allow a predictable regional product integrated into our markets at the ISO New England level that would allow states to elect different levels of ambition, but not require any state to participate. One thing that we also see is a real compelling aspect of its design is municipalities and companies could participate. One thing that we are increasingly asked is how companies or municipal light plants in Massachusetts can participate in our offshore wind bids, but it's very limited in an electric distribution company procurement model. So we do see that this could open the door to democratizing a lot of scalable, clean energy procurements, and kind of builds on what we're seeing as the limitations of what the existing attribute market is in New England, while delivering the type of megawatt hours that our roadmap sees as necessary in the coming decade. Obviously, a lot of work that needs to be done regionally, and ISO New England is studying this design and is committed to delivering those results in the first quarter of next year. I think I conclude with one last slide here about we do see by creating this type of market, we do see some important voids that would be left of ensuring economic development, which is important to all states individually, and also ensuring that equity issues and environmental justice issues, permitting issues would still be considered within that framework. And I think that would be up to each individual state working together to try to create alignment to ensure that those aspects are still considered going forward. So with that, I'll conclude. I hope I didn't go too far over in the presentation, and open for some further discussion or questions.